Good evening. This is the Athens City Shade Tree Commission meeting for August 11th, 2011. We're going to begin with tree permit and right-of-way issues. There are no tree permits outstanding, I think, at the moment that we need to consider, but we'd like to move to the fall planting list and discussion of that and where we are. We've had various contributions of sites and so on. I believe, Ron, that we're still looking at part of this being fulfilled with an order of 20 elms. Have you got anything else to add to the fall planting? Have we got a timetable or a budget in mind?
I do have one more significant area. It's the bike path extension on West 8th Street.
Okay.
That will be funded with money from that project.
Okay.
So I would like to get with members of the Shade Tree Commission to take a look at that site and see what would be of interest to all of you.
Okay, and that's to be planted in the fall or
Yes.
maybe next spring, if depending on the
Fall and
species.
spring, probably fall.
Okay.
The typical budget's around $5,000, but the last couple of years we were able to do more.
Yeah.
So
Does that include the West 8th Street?
no, that will be
in addition.
different money.
Okay, because obviously if we do buy 20 elms, we need to try and spread them out around so we don't get them all in one place at the same time. And so we have to mix them in with some of the more regular species that we tend to buy.
Okay.
So you want to get with us and we'll figure out a time for a
and any locations that you would like to do. I know that, Ally, I think you sent me a couple of sites already, haven't you?
Yeah, it was a suggestion about one street in particular that has no overhead power lines, from what I can understand, and potentially 4 sites, all of them in what appear to be yards, so that we have to contact the people to make sure that they really want that to happen.
Okay.
And I've got some from last year that you may also have as well that weren't fulfilled. They came in rather late, and I've got a series of backup sites along Morris Avenue that could also be where we can be planting younger trees in preparation for when the silver maples will be removed. Because we've got several silver maples along that street that are getting towards the end of their lives.
There's also a couple trees from last year that didn't make it.
Yes.
We could probably get those replaced under warranty.
Yeah.
And they weren't under warranty?
They are.
Oh, they are.
They
Okay,
should be.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so we're moving forward and we'll come up with a date. For me, it'll have to be at least in 10 days' time before I can do anything like that. But we'll get together after the meeting and try and sort out some times when we can go and have a look at the West 8th Street site. But I think we should try and get a list finalised before the end of August if we can.
Yep.
Would that fit in with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. The other issue I'd like to sort of raise is the discussion of policies, particularly where we're dealing with planting of trees in the rights of way, and also who can be hired to prune or remove trees. Now, we've spoken in the past in general terms about this and how we would prefer the city to use ISA certified arborists to do the pruning and removals. We've never actually come up with a written document. And so as we're thinking of what might go into a written document like that, now is the time to sort of raise issues and so on. I don't think it would be unfair to other businesses if we did have that stipulation in there, because there are several very competent businesses that could compete and do the work to the standard that we really want them to do. The question is about this as to whether we could then require that if we give permission for a homeowner to have work done, that they also use an ISA certified arborist when that work is being done on trees in the rights of way. So there's the two issues, whether we require the city or we expect the city to do that, and whether we expect the homeowners to do that. I think it'd be fair to have both, but that just needs to be, I think, in the policy.
Now, are you visualizing something where that credential would be required immediately, or is this something that contractors that don't have it would have a certain amount of time to get it?
that's a good discussion point. We started into this several years ago, but then the city started looking at licensing various contractors within the city. I'm not sure whether any of that would apply currently to people who are pruning trees in the right-of-way. Do you know if that's the case or not?
I know with the contractor registration, it's something that we can easily add on to. So
Okay.
if it's a landscaping company, we can add some type of
Okay.
box in the form.
Well, I'd much rather go with something that the city's already got and that we can adapt to this purpose.
Yeah.
And so that may be the route to take for it.
So you want this pretty much to be very similar to what the standards we wanted for the AEP to do?
Yes, only there we couldn't require the ISA certification, and we may or may not require that with these contractors. I mean, would that be possible, do you think, with this licensing process the city's got?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's something we can definitely explore.
Okay.
Or at least like announce it now, wait a year for people.
Especially if that goes down to the other point,
Yeah.
exactly. If we give time for contractors to work towards it, there's no excuse, really.
Do you know, or do you recall how long it takes to get somebody certified after they've decided they're going to do it?
The class is about 3 months and then a test date, and it all depends on if you pass that first test. The first test, the minimum would be 4 months.
Yeah, okay.
The
So
minimum
a
length.
year would be reasonable.
Yeah, okay. So we need to work on that anyway. That's it's been on the to-do list for a long time. And then the other one is concerns. We've never formally written down what our standards should be for planting of trees in the right of way. This clearly would help people that Ron wants to hire to do this work. I think it should consist of some specification in terms of the size of trees, whether they're clear of branches to a certain height, what type of mulching is done around them. But what else would we want in a policy like that?
Well, the type of hole that is dug, the depth and width and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Are we seeing a problem with the trees being planted?
No, except that when we've had a property owner who, in conforming with the landscape ordinance, is then given permission to plant in the right of way, some of those trees have not been big enough, in my opinion.
Because they're planting them.
Yeah, because they are planting them. And I think we need to just lay down that if you're going to fulfill your requirement for landscaping by planting in the right of way, which Title 37 allows, then you need to plant to a certain standard.
I understand.
And it will be much easier to defend that later by saying, well, this is the policy, and it's written down. But depth of, and so on, preparation, basically.
Well, proper depth of planting also, because now sometimes trees are coming, say potted and planted too deep in the pot, and that can cause problems with encircling roots later on, which can be a major problem. And I think that there's some information about that I think should be included.
Okay.
And then mulching. So many of the so-called landscapers, often they're people who primarily cut grass and do maintenance, mulch improperly.
Volcano mulch.
And there has been some mulching at the community center that was not done quite as well as it should have been.
And sometimes because of the mulching, you can't really tell if they've been properly planted unless you start whittling around in the mold.
Removing the mulching.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so those are two policies anyway that I think we need to consider, and there may well be others that we need to establish.
Like staking?
Staking, yes, that would be. I think it's always useful to stake.
Flags, people don't run into them. That's a problem.
What was that one, Jared? Flagging?
Putting down stakes, do you need to put flags on there to prevent people from hitting them? I don't know if that's an issue or not. I mean, if it's heavily populated. Like if we're going to put any of the trees on Court Street, I know a couple of them are gone now, again, especially the one in front of the diner. I think that's now gone. I don't know.
Which reminds me, for the fall planting list, we need to check along Court Street again.
Yeah.
And you may have a
Two spots.
potential site in the frontier where there's a pear tree that's in decline.
Those are on the removal list. They're actually contracted out, so they'll definitely be site. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say a couple other items we can probably look at are tree guards and the water bags.
Well,
Gator bags.
I think tree guards are more important than staking because often staking is done improperly or when it is not needed.
The unstaking part is
It's the unstaking, yeah.
Yes, the unstaking that's the issue, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, we've got a good list there together. Anything else? Okay. Let's move along then to the landscape ordinance issues. We don't have any plans to review. I am promised that there will likely be one at the next meeting. That may well be a PUD, which is one of these more complicated ones, and that we will try and arrange for us to see the plans perhaps together down at the Code Office and look at it there ahead of the meeting. The other thing that I put on the agenda for tonight was additional discussion of potential changes to Title 37. And to clarify one thing, it was John Katowski who said that we might want to change the timing of the plantings. In the memo I sent out to you, I think it was John Patsky, I'd indicated and said that it wasn't. So that was one suggestion, that we changed from allowing people to have up to 2 planting seasons, which in general terms has meant a year, to perhaps restricting that. It may even be that we just say, well, you've got to come to us for permission not to have them planted when you think the project is finished. I mean, when occupancy is being dealt with in the property. Now, John Patsky raised the issue of, well, we don't have a building department to check on when people occupy things. I'm not sure whether you've got any opinion, Ron, on how we determine a date for when things have to be done by.
X amount of time after the project is complete.
Yeah. I think my impression is we're giving people too much grace, and we may want to tighten up on that.
Well, it depends on the time, any completion of the project, really.
Well, there's a rental permit that's issued at a certain time, right? So,
well, that would be for that type of property, but if we're dealing with other properties, business properties and so on, I'm not sure how you set the deadline, but I think we want to try and rein it in and get them to come for permission to extend.
Just so when it was written, put in there that if they need an extension, they need to come and ask. I think that's a really good idea.
So that's one way to deal with that one. I don't know, Paul, if you've got any ideas about buffering, if you wanted to talk at all about that. We spoke in general terms about having buffering required between different zone areas.
may I come up there?
Certainly, yeah.
I've got a little bit, David. This is just, I thought maybe this would be a good starting point, since I looked to see what a lot of other communities were doing just to get a handle on it, and everybody was all over the place. This is taken from a model land development code that I purchased, that the city bought from the American Planning Association, puts out about every 10 years. They try to update just a basic code that they thought were best practices for any community to use as a good resource. So I did make copies of the relevant sections relating to buffers, maybe just as a good starting point for what we would want to talk about, if anything. My concern with buffers, or my thoughts, were always focusing on where our business and manufacturing zones meet our residential zones, not necessarily putting buffers between parcels within the same zoning, but to just kind of look at screening issues and landscaping to soften the edges between, especially when it comes to commercial next to residential. I was hoping to do more field work on it for you guys. I just have not had time to really take some detailed analysis of what's going on in the city. I believe we had buffers at one point, or something of that nature, took them out.
The original, well, the previous version of Title 37 required certain width borders to all properties, 4 foot in some cases, 8 foot in others. That we found that we had to forgive that too many times to make it reasonable, and so that was why we took it out of the current version. But we did say that there should be buffering between adjacent properties unless the two property owners agree that there's no need for buffering. That was our sort of fix for that. The concern I think we've got about the whether or not you should have buffering in a given zone, just one zone, would be if you've got a parking lot up against somebody's private residence, shouldn't there be a requirement for buffering, even though they may be zoned the same, in the same residential
I'm
area?
open-minded to that idea too. I'm not shutting the door on that.
That's one of the circumstances I can see when you might require buffering in one zone. Because of that type of construction. Now that, under the old Title 37, there would have been a 4 foot or an 8 foot, depending on the size of property and so on, edge around that property. So there clearly would have been some sort of buffer. And under the current version, there has to be an agreement between the adjacent property owners if there is not to be a buffer. And that's why I'm sort of a bit leery about taking the language about buffering out of Title 37, and why I'd like to get some ideas from our planner here as to what we can do. So that's the sort of, that's where we've been. And I think there's a feeling with the Code Office that really that's not working too well. We do need to think about some better buffering. Maybe we need a multi-step process where if they are different zones, there has to be buffering. When it's the same zone, if there's something about this that we really want to have buffering, like a parking lot, then we have to figure out the language so that we can require that.
Would it be possible, David, either with some of the shade tree commissioners or you and I, spend a couple hours one afternoon or morning and do some field work? Admittedly, landscape issues are not my expertise, and I do rely on the five of you and the other commissioners for that advice.
It would probably have to be a Saturday or Sunday when we do it.
Well, I can do Saturdays and Sundays as well. But if that would be of interest, if this is something that you guys would like to review, I'd consider other options.
Well, I think what we've got residential properties in R3, for instance. We've got businesses in areas where redevelopment is going on, and it's sometimes very hard to put buffering in when you're dealing with a redevelopment site. And then we've got greenfield sites. So we've got a broad range of examples. I think we can run over.
I think Mr. Paskey's concern was particularly in high-density residential areas.
Well, we did, earlier this year, council did pass a change to our zoning code for the residential zones to limit the amount of impermeable surface on a lot to 60%. It used to just be that your structure could only be 40% of the lot, but if you wanted to, you could pave the other 60% to create parking areas, and so council did shut that down to guarantee that we have some green space in our residential zones when any type of redevelopment happens. Now, things that are done are already done, but so that should minimize some of that, I think. But maybe we do want to be looking at giving tailoring the ordinance to be able to give developers some advice if they've got excess space there, with ways to do buffering or ways to soften those in their parking areas too.
Yeah.
So I'm all for it.
But you said that would be for more green space, but what happens, or can they just put something permeable like gravel down?
They can put gravel as it relates specifically to landscaping. So if you want to have stone around your shrubs or something, and, incorporating that into your mulch or your garden. But no, it does not allow you to. No, that does not allow for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
And it doesn't allow you to just use permeable paving or anything like that either. It is required that it be green space.
So you can still mulch with stone as they do in the southwest.
Yeah.
Let me see, there were a couple of other things I think on that review as well that yes, we're going to want to tighten up on the language in terms of the plans that are available. And again, you may be able to, Paul, you may be able to help us with that. You're probably aware that in the PUD and subdivision regulations, there's some fairly detailed instructions as to how a plan is prepared, particularly in terms of existing trees, changes to landscape and so on. We'd like to, I think, reflect some of that over in Title 37, so that plans that are brought to us for landscaping, particularly for developments that have more than one lot, we need to know what trees exist there and why it is those trees are going to be removed. That was a concern recently with one development. And as I say, there is language elsewhere in the code, and I think we should just try and copy that language over if that's satisfactory. But that's one of the things that we'll be asking you about, is to, does it make sense to put language like that into our requirements? Because it obviously means that the plans have to be a little bit more detailed than they currently might be. But many of these plans are coming through Title 41, and for some reason I thought Title 41 had these requirements in, but when I read it recently I realised it didn't. So that's why I think we need to revise Title 37. So unless 41 is going to be revised to reflect a change in the planning requirements, I think we're going to change.
It may be, but there's nothing.
Okay.
We may do a review of it at the end of the year.
Okay.
And we did that a year and a half ago.
Okay.
To tighten it up a little bit, but that's something we can revise again, of course.
So there were just things, there are things that we really want on a plan. They are appearing in the ones that come up for subdivisions, or they should definitely be there for subdivisions and PUDs, but they're not there for the general plans presented under Title 37. Anything else on Title 37 revisions that people have got concerns with? And we'll obviously bring this to you to allow you to introduce. And is there a good time limit we should put on ourselves so that we get it to you, to council, by October? Is that or is November still possible to get something?
As long as we have enough time to introduce it and pass it before the end of the year.
Okay.
So sometime in October would be perfect.
Okay. Okay. So we'll aim for that then as the time frame we'll try and work to, if we can. Ron, it's your turn now, I think. What have you got to report to us?
You got my big one, the fall tree planting, so thank you. I did want to give an update on the Columbia Gas project on the Near East Side. There's been some concern regarding tree damage, and I did get confirmation from Joe Yanity at Columbia Gas today that any trees that are damaged or died in direct relation to the project will be taken care of. Probably not in the same spot, but they're a pretty good organization. I think they'll take care of it. Basically, we can ask them where we would want to put an appropriate tree instead of right on the new line.
So when you say take care of,
We
is that
planted.
removal and replacement?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. But they're of the opinion at this point that there will be minimal tree impact. East State Street, just for an FYI, did catch them by surprise, particularly with the number of sidewalk removals and open ditches that you're seeing. There was a 12-inch water line and a storm sewer line on each side of where they wanted to go with the gas line. So they had to make adjustments on the fly. And for a walkability standpoint, they did commit to put some stone into those sidewalk areas prior to the school starting up. But any trees that are impacted will also be taken care of accordingly.
When will the project be done?
They don't have an exact date. What their goal is to get the areas around the school and East State Street done first, before East Elementary starts up, and before OU starts back up in session.
Well, one of the concerns I've got was the depth of that line. Do we know what their guaranteed minimum depth is going to be on that gas line? Because if we're planting trees, we need to know we can go down 2 feet, I think, at least, when we're trying to plant some of
I'll
the
need to
trees.
check on that. I don't know what their minimum depth is.
Because it's being put in the tree lawn. I assume it's going to be on both sides of the street, is it? They're going to do this, or are they just doing it on one side of each street?
I think they're just doing one.
So they're going to have to cross the street to get
Yeah,
to
they
the
directional
properties.
bore under the street.
That's going to be interesting. Putting that big machine in people's yards. Okay. So anyway, yes, if you could find out what the minimum depth is going to be, because also, is it possible to trace that with the tracing?
Yeah, they're installing a copper wire on all the new line that you can trace with a tracer.
Okay. Because, I mean, as well as us putting trees down, I think property owners down there, when they replace their sewer lines, as they often do in the Near East Side, are going to be going straight through those gas lines if they're not careful.
Yeah, they do. They will install that copper line on all the new lines.
Okay.
And I don't know if they'll do it on the laterals, but in most cases, the laterals will be perpendicular to the meter.
Yes. Well, perpendicular to the street.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the...
Yeah, so from the meter at the house,
Yeah.
perpendicular to the road, that's where your line will be. The only other thing I had was a status on removals. I do have a spreadsheet. I can get a copy. I can send you an email copy of it, of where we're at with our removals and pruning efforts for this year. All I can say is that we're behind, particularly due to storms and some other concerns with our tree care provider. So health issues. So anyway, they're under contract.
Yeah. But as long as the
Yeah.
trees aren't
But if you're getting pressure for any particular tree, the storms are really the number on all the tree care companies. They're busy.
Are there any questions for Ron?
It'd be good to have that email. People call and ask us.
Okay.
So Ron, if some people were calling me and the question came up, there's like one property owner, I think, a big branch broke off and it's hanging on the telephone line. And it was hanging down into the street. Actually, I was property owner. And so I pruned it to get it up so at least a sedan could get through. Now, I didn't call. Should property owners be calling the city and saying there's a problem? I had a feeling that as soon as the city vehicle went down that they might report it, but should I have reported that?
Yeah, I would, particularly if it's on a line. We don't know if it's an electric phone or.
Well, I know it's a telephone line, but it's just that a vehicle coming along, I was afraid someone would just drive down and it would
Yeah, anything that's an immediate threat to the right-of-way, just call us.
Okay, good.
Got one thing. On the bike trail, just south of the library, there's a line of trees. One of them was damaged. You guys pulled that out of there. Was that vandalized, and whether or not that's going to be replaced?
The thought is that it was vandalized.
Was it? Okay.
The intent is to put it on a fall planting.
Okay.
It's a fall planting item.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Ron. I have nothing further to report on the Airwood Ash Borer. I don't know if, Paul, you have got something for us, maybe? Oh, look at that.
There it is.
Okay.
All 20 pages of it.
Thank you.
There's also one map, which I can print out more of these. Ink is very expensive on these. I will put the emerald ash, or the ash tree shape file on the city's GIS website so anybody can access it as well.
Yeah.
This is the best I could do. It is complete though. Ron and I did finish up the entire south side about 3 weeks ago. And it took me a while to actually get it into the GIS system for the mapping. The report as well was in the GIS system. And it can be converted into Excel if anybody would like it in that format. The GIS software is expensive, so I assume none of you would have it on your laptops, but we'll put it on the website so you can use it that way. I did also uploaded a PDF of the map onto the city's front page.
Okay, good. I was going to ask if it was available, so you've already put it
It is,
there.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I believe we had 470 trees that we were inventoried. I know this has been going on for a long time. I'm sure some of you were probably taking those grids about before I was hired by the city, so that was probably 3.5 or 4 years ago. So some of that data is included in here as well. I'm not going to say it's complete. I'm sure we had so many volunteers working on it. There's got to be some trees that were missed. Not all these trees are necessarily in the right-of-way. I instructed any of the students that I worked with, if they weren't sure about it, to just put it in there. If they caught anything anywhere on campus or in the city that they knew was an ash tree, even if it was 30 feet away from a right-of-way, to put it on here anyway, just so that we have as complete a picture as possible. And so, this is what we've got.
Okay. Now, we just need to crank the numbers and see what the city wants to do in terms of its liabilities, because the big question is the liability presented by this, given the lifespan of a tree that gets infected, is that too big a risk for the city to bear? Do we have to think about preemptive removal of ash trees? And I know that many of us do not want to do that, and that's one of the things that we've got to look at carefully once we've got this list and figure out, well, what would it cost over a 3 to 5 year period to remove all of these ash trees? And as I say, is that something the city can afford to do? Or has it got to try and spread it out over a longer period of time and take preemptive action over this?
And I would say it's safe to say that roughly 30% of the identified ash trees are not in the city right-of-way. A few of the students, they really canvassed campus just because they were walking over on campus all day and they had them in their backpacks, the grids, so they would just start inventorying things that they found. A good example, I think, is Peden Stadium parking lot. Those are all
they're all
ash trees.
This is recent.
Oakland Hospital, all of their trees in their parking lots are ash trees. So there's things like that we mapped, even though we knew they weren't on rights of ways. But just
Deal on ash trees a few years ago.
there must have been, probably they should start shipping.
Oh, they ash trees are really
Out of
cheap a few
Michigan.
years ago, yes.
Well, one of the recommendations, as I recall, please correct me if I'm wrong, was one inexpensive thing to do, relatively expensive, is to remove small ones, saplings and things, so that they don't get any size on them before. And I know that sounds kind of feeble in a way because the big ones are going to be more dangerous. But on the other hand, that's something preemptive to do.
Yeah, and that was certainly something that we did discuss early on, the idea that something perhaps below 3 inches could be removed fairly easily. Although how many ash trees are in the right of way that are now less than 3 inches, I don't know.
How long has it been since the city's plan?
How long have you been working for the city for? 2 years? 3 years?
No, 3.5 years now.
Yeah, 3 years. So we started about 5 years ago
Yeah.
into this.
I believe it was before Mayor Wow was elected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the previous mayor that...
All those 2-inch caliber trees are now 18-inch.
maybe 4 or 5, yeah.
That's such stringent standards.
Do we know when the last time the city planted an ash tree was?
Well, there were nearly some planted
I would say 10 years. I would
by the
think.
community center, but somebody spoke up and said, I don't think we should put in a grove of ash trees.
Yeah, I would think at least 10 years. I mean, how long, when you were chair, were any planted, do you think?
There were some that were done in parking lots in what had been university property, those old airport strips, so at the point of Staples. I think
But those, yeah. But
I think there's some ash trees in there. No, they're not city, but that was one of those things where they were saying not a good idea, but
So there's no small ash trees out there?
maybe not.
I think the youngest ones the city has got are probably the ones around the community centre.
Okay.
And those never did get terribly big because they had a terrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say it's probably 10 years since we, because I think once it was known that this was a problem, we just said, no, we're not planting any. And then Mayor Abel asked us towards the end of his term for the tree commission to survey and then do what we've got and come up with a plan. We did an initial survey of a small area which indicated we might have as many, if you took extremes, as 1,000 trees to remove, but it doesn't look like we're going to be at this level. It was an area on the east side that is fairly well treed, and so that's why it was probably giving an overestimate. And what we need to do now is just look at these numbers and crunch them and make a final decision. But I'm hoping that we can come out with the statement that we will only start removing trees once they get infected.
Do we know where progress is being made, or not progress, but where the emerald ash
The
is?
emerald ash borer is in some isolated counties, not that far away from us. And so it could crop up in this county anytime.
Have you heard recently, Emily?
No, but I know that in a relatively few years' time, it's becoming a major problem in Columbus. When we first were hearing of the emerald ash borer, they knew of none in the Columbus area, and now it's a definite problem there.
Yes, I parked by some trees in a parking lot where the trees were dying and it had the little D-shaped hole
In Columbus.
in Columbus.
Hope you didn't bring anyone back with you.
I didn't, well, I parked far away from them.
And is it a pattern that when trees are found in an area, that it's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak? By the time you find a tree, there are a lot of other trees out there.
Yes.
And once the infection progresses, I seem to remember the trees. So that's the sort of period of time over which we'd have to budget for removal.
Yeah, and an individual tree goes very quickly, doesn't it? By the time you see it,
Yeah.
and you can actually diagnose it.
2 to 3 years, I think, is the time. 3 years is the maximum you might expect a tree to be there. And it could take up to 5 years for all the trees in the community to be infected.
And a dead tree is much more hazardous to remove.
Yes, yeah, we would like to remove them before they're dead.
They're kind of lazy.
And a dead ash tree is more hazardous than a dead tree of some other species.
They're kind of lazy too. They'll stay here until they.
What?
They're kind of lazy. They'll stay here until they destroy every tree. They don't want to fly far. They'll just kind of, yeah, I'm done with this one. Let's find another one nearby before they decide to go on a long flight.
I think something else at some point we need to consider is whether homeowners want to treat trees that are in the right of way. And will that be fine with us, or?
We'll have to think about it. I'm not going to make a decision tonight, but
That's the sort of thing that, as many things are complaint-driven, it would be initiative-driven. I can't imagine many people even really having that kind of...
There's no really efficacious treatment, is there?
well, I think Anne did mention there is a treatment that if you've got a particularly valuable tree that you want to preserve, that it will defend the tree. But how long, I don't know.
And it's most effective on younger trees, the treatment. So, injection.
I know
For what?
I know that a couple of people who are very knowledgeable about this have chosen to attempt to save trees on their own property. And I know in my daughter's neighborhood, there is a huge, beautiful ash across the street from her that her neighbor has been spending a lot of money on. It's still healthy. Other trees in the neighborhood are dying.
But I think, from what I remember, it's a treatment that has to be continued. It's not,
Yes.
it's not a one-off.
And I don't know a lot about it, but apparently some of the newer treatments seem to be more effective or show more promise than some of the earlier ones.
That's hopeful.
But no, I think the city would have to think about this carefully before it would agree to people preserving one of its trees. There is the question as to what sort of information campaign the city should undertake for people in terms of informing them as to what they should be doing with their trees on their property.
Apparently, at least in some neighborhoods, once this has developed, there have been a lot of ads on television about products to use. And that sort of advertisement often can be more effective than what the city can put out.
Okay, so thank you, Paul and Ron, for completing that.
Ron did most of the work. I still don't have a very good grasp on identifying any tree. And I don't know how many volunteers we had devote time to it, so.
Thank you to all the volunteers if you're watching.
Yeah.
Wow, this is really admirable.
Yeah. Anything else on the Emerald Ash Borer? So hopefully by either a September meeting or certainly October, we'll come up with the plan. At least the proposed plan for what the city's going to do, because then the council and the mayor are going to have to decide how they want to tackle it.
For 470 trees at $350 a removal, we're looking at about $170,000.
Yes.
So is that 470, and if you kind of rough out, taking out about 150, assuming that 30% are not on city right of way, how you come up with that?
I just did a rough calculation
Just on
here just now. Yeah,
on base of
just
470.
based on this. Some
Yeah.
trees will cost more, some will cost less.
I mean, that was a number I was going to ask him for, because I wasn't sure what it was. And it's something, we may go to some of the contractors and say, well, look, if you had to remove 20 or 30 trees in a lot, what's it going to take us to do?
We could bid that out.
Do we get a deal on a
Absolutely.
large lot, so to speak?
So we need to look carefully at the list and see what we're dealing with, because I'm hoping it's going to be manageable. I really do. I do not want to have to approve preemptive removal. And I know that several of us have said that in the past as well. We do not want to have preemptive removal of these trees. We want to leave them there as long as we can.
We really like for people who know they have an ash tree to go ahead and plant another tree so that there can be a replacement growing.
Yeah.
Because it would really be nice not to lose that coverage.
And that's one thing we should look at in terms of our plantings for the next few years, is are there clusters of ash trees that are going to leave big holes? And that they would be places where we should try and plant some younger trees. Okay, I don't have anything else for the agenda. Do other tree commissioners have anything they want to raise? Ron?
Just an announcement. Southeast Ohio Tree Care Conference is on September 22nd at ODNR on East 8th Street. Interesting that you brought up canopy replacement. There is a agenda item that we'll be discussing that, strategies to protect our canopy.
Good.
One thing, tree on 53 May, that's a Norway maple, one of the Crimson Kings. Looks like there's a lot of dieback on that.
North or South May?
It's south.
South May.
And it's pretty much on the street side, it looks, well, pretty green or purple or whatever. But on the homeowner's side, it's really bare, and there's some peeling bark. Seems to me at least half the canopy's gone.
Okay, anything else? If not, let's consider the minutes from the last meeting.
There's an error in item 2 down at the very bottom paragraph. Paskey suggested that Commission consider revising the 2-year planning period. That should read Katowski.
And then that means that he also should be changed to Patsky.
Yes.
It was Patsky who made that suggestion about the buffers.
Gotcha.
There's one minor one on the last page, 2 colons in the date, or the time, sorry.
Yes.
Any other corrections in the minutes? If not, would somebody like to propose and someone else second that we accept these minutes?
Accept these minutes.
Okay, Jared proposes we accept, second.
You don't like them anyway?
Under me sending out the recommended list of trees, I did that. I noted that it was the 2005 edition. We probably ought to look at that for revision as well at some point. Thank you, Emily. Okay, are there any objections to us approving the minutes of the last meeting? Hearing none, we have approved minutes. Our next meeting will be September the 8th. That is Labour Day week, but that would be the second Thursday of the month, and so that's when we're planning to have the meeting. As I said, hopefully we will have a plan available for us to review at least a week before, because I pointed out that is a holiday weekend, and so I'd like to hopefully get them 2 weeks ahead if we can, so we've got some time to have a look at these plans. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.